Trump's Board of Peace reveal is coming soon. Kings without kingdoms? This isn't a peace plan anymore. It's starting to look like a governing model. And that distinction changes everything. On January 16th, the White House announced something called the Board of Peace, and the composition stopped me cold. World Bank presidents, private equity billionaires, figures who don't represent nations in the traditional sense. They represent institutions, economic power, influence without borders. There are critical pieces to what was just revealed. The first few will reframe how you understand modern diplomacy. But the last, a phrase in Revelation 17 about rulers who receive power without kingdoms, that's the one that makes this board look less like politics and more like prophecy. The 10 kings of Revelation don't need crowns. They need coordination. Number 1, what the Board of Peace is. Let me break this down in simple terms, because the way it's been reported can be confusing. The Board of Peace is not a peace treaty. It's not a diplomatic statement. It's not a temporary negotiating committee that will dissolve once a ceasefire holds. What was announced is a governing oversight structure, an international body designed to manage, coordinate, and enforce the implementation of peace. That word, enforce, is significant. It implies authority, real authority. The kind of authority that Revelation describes being concentrated in the hands of end-times rulers. And here's what's prophetically significant about enforcement. It doesn't require invasion. It requires cooperation. It requires voluntary compliance. It requires exactly the kind of framework we're watching being built. Hold on to that thought. We'll come back to it. Its first mission is Gaza. Specifically, Phase 2 of Trump's 20-point plan to end the Gaza conflict. This phase involves stabilization, reconstruction, demilitarization of Hamas, and the establishment of a technocratic Palestinian committee to administer the territory. But here's what's significant. The board isn't just advising, it's overseeing. It has authority over reconstruction funding, security arrangements, governance frameworks, and international coordination. Think about what that means. This isn't diplomats offering suggestions. This is an international body with actual oversight power over a piece of territory and its future. And here's where it gets interesting. Many of the people being invited to this board don't represent traditional nation states in the usual sense. They represent institutions. They represent economic power. They represent influence that crosses borders without armies or flags. When you see the names, this will become concrete. Remember what Daniel said about the covenant? It would be with many. Not with one nation. Not bilateral. With many. The multinational nature of this board isn't incidental. It's central to its design. Invitations have been sent to approximately 60 countries. 60. And here's what's striking about that number. It directly parallels what Daniel described over 2,500 years ago. We'll examine that passage later. And when we do, you'll see why the with many characteristic isn't coincidental. But the real shock isn't Gaza. The real shock is who is being invited to govern. And when you see the names, when you see the mix of figures assembled, you will understand why this feels different from anything we've seen in modern diplomacy. Now let me walk you through who was actually named to this board, because the composition tells you everything about what kind of structure this is. Pay close attention here. These names are going to become significant when we examine what Revelation says about end times authority. Each person I'm about to mention represents a different type of power. And that diversity is itself prophetically significant. The founding executive board, the core steering group, includes 7 members announced on January 16th and 17th. 7. While I'm not making a direct claim about prophetic numerology, that number is significant throughout Scripture. First, there's President Trump himself, serving as chairman. This isn't a ceremonial role. He's positioned as the central figure around whom this entire structure revolves. Remember that. Second, Marco Rubio, the current U.S. Secretary of State. His presence signals that this board has the full weight of American foreign policy behind it. Third, Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and the architect of the Abraham Accords. His involvement connects this board directly to the previous peace framework and suggests continuity with those agreements. Now here's what's striking about Kushner's presence. The Abraham Accords already exist. The Gaza peace framework already exists. What we're seeing isn't the creation of something new. It's the strengthening of something that already exists. And Daniel's prophecy uses a very specific word. Not create a covenant, but confirm a covenant. Strengthen it. Make it binding. That distinction matters enormously, and I'll show you exactly why when we examine Daniel 9:27. Fourth, Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, who declared Phase 2 underway on January 14th. Fifth, and this is where it gets interesting, Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Blair has been involved in Middle East peace efforts for years, but his presence here signals something beyond American initiative. This is multinational. This is a coalition. Sixth, Ajay Banga, the president of the World Bank. Stop there for a moment. Banga doesn't represent a nation. He represents a global financial institution. His authority comes from economic leverage, not territorial sovereignty. He has no army. He has no flag. But he controls capital flows that affect billions of people. That's a different kind of power. And it's exactly the kind of power Revelation 17 describes when it talks about kings who receive authority without kingdoms. Remember his name, because when we examine that passage, figures like Banga will suddenly make the prophecy concrete in a way previous generations could never have imagined. Seventh, Mark Rowan, a private equity billionaire and CEO of Apollo Global Management. Again, not a government official, not a diplomat, a figure whose power comes from capital, not citizenship. His inclusion signals that this board operates at the intersection of government and global finance. Do you see what's happening here? This isn't a traditional diplomatic structure. This is a mix of government officials, former leaders, international institution heads, and private sector billionaires, all operating as a steering group with oversight authority. These figures operate above normal political accountability. They're not elected by the people they'll govern. They're appointed. Trump called it the greatest and most prestigious board ever assembled. But here's the prophetic question. Revelation says the final coalition won't look like ancient empires. It won't look like armies and conquests. It will look like power without borders, authority without traditional kingdoms, influence concentrated in the hands of figures who rule through coordination, not crowns. But what gives this board its legitimacy? What makes it legal in the eyes of the international community? That's what we need to examine next. Here's what most people don't realize about this Board of Peace. It isn't just a U.S. initiative with international support. It has formal UN Security Council authorization. Resolution 2803 passed in November 2025. 13 votes in favor. This resolution authorized the establishment of a temporary international stabilization force to operate in Gaza. It gave legal framework to the multinational presence we've been discussing. Now here's the part that sounds like Revelation 17. And I need you to pay very close attention to what this passage actually says. Now we come to the passage that has so many people drawing connections to what we're seeing unfold. I want to walk through this carefully, because understanding what Revelation 17 actually says, and what it doesn't say, is essential for proper discernment. Revelation 17:12-13. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Let me break this down, phrase by phrase, because every detail matters. First, 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet. These aren't traditional monarchs ruling over established territories. They don't have kingdoms in the usual sense. They're kings without the normal trappings of kingship, without borders, without thrones, without hereditary claims to power. Yet they function as kings. They wield authority. They exercise influence. Now think about what we just examined. The World Bank president doesn't have a kingdom. Private equity billionaires don't have kingdoms. International institution heads don't have kingdoms. They have something else entirely. Economic leverage, institutional authority, influence that crosses borders without armies or flags. That's a different kind of power, and it's exactly what this passage describes. Previous generations couldn't imagine what kings without kingdoms would look like, but we can. We're watching them be appointed to an international board right now. Second, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Their authority is temporary. It's delegated. It's tied to a specific period and a specific alignment with the beast. The phrase 1 hour emphasizes brevity. This isn't a long-standing empire. It's a short-lived coalition that emerges for a specific purpose. Now think about the phase-based structure of the Board of Peace. Phase 1. Phase 2. Future phases anticipated. Temporary authority. Defined periods. Limited mandates that can be extended or terminated, exactly the kind of arrangement Scripture describes. Third, these have one mind. They're unified. They share a common agenda. Despite potentially different backgrounds, different interests, different spheres of influence, they operate with unified purpose. Their coordination is what makes them powerful. Now I want to be absolutely clear here. I am not saying the Board of Peace is the fulfillment of Revelation 17. We are not in the tribulation. The Antichrist has not been revealed. The seal judgments, trumpet judgments, and bowl judgments described in Revelation have not occurred. According to the biblical timeline, Revelation 17's events take place during the latter part of the tribulation, after many other prophetic milestones have been reached. But here's what I am saying. The structure being assembled right now demonstrates that the kind of arrangement Revelation describes is possible. It shows us what kings without kingdoms could look like in the modern world. It reveals a template, and templates can be expanded. Pilot programs can go global. What works in Gaza can be applied elsewhere. Now, let me show you specifically why this structure matches the prophetic pattern. When you see the characteristics laid out side by side, the alignment becomes striking. I'm not saying this board is the fulfillment. I'm saying this board shows us what fulfillment could look like. That's an important distinction. First, it's multinational. This isn't an American initiative dressed up with international support. The Board of Peace genuinely includes figures from multiple nations and institutions. The Turkish Foreign Minister, Trump's Board of Peace reveal is coming soon.